Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 10 of the Creative Corner podcast with your host, Max. Creative Corner is hosted by LifeProof, which is at LifeProof UK across all social media. So be sure to follow us on there for job opportunities, opportunities in your area as well, and about getting involved. My guest today is Jack Royle. Jack, we're just going to get to you in just a second. I've not actually sent him the questions for this week's episode, so questions might be a little bit more raw and a little bit more from the heart, perhaps. We're not quite sure. So yeah, we're just going to jump right into it. Jack, thank you so much for joining me today. If you just want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll just go from there.
Cheers for having me on. My name's Jack. I'm currently based in Sheffield in the UK, and I'm a graphic designer / illustrator. Well, I try and turn my hand at most things that come through the door, to be honest. So general graphic design is what I normally tend to go by, but I've got a passion for illustration as well.
Fair enough. So the question that I normally ask my guest, Jack, is that sort of like their origin story, if you like. You know, was there a particular moment in which you picked up creativity, picked up graphic design, picked up illustration? Was that something that evolved over time? Did that passion grow, or was it just something that you stumbled upon? You know, so sort of like explain as much as you can, sort of like how this started for you and where you are now.
Well, I think I've always been that weird kid at the back of school who was just drawing stuff in the back of his notebook. It was pretty much the only thing at school that I was actually good at was art. Everything else I just either struggled with or didn't really find it that interesting, but art was always that lesson that I really enjoyed. So you could argue in a way that it's always been something that I've had a keen interest in and had a bit of a passion for. In terms of deciding one day that this is what I wanted to do as a career, I originally went to university to do product design. I enjoyed it, but I didn't really like the actual designing of the product. I enjoyed much more like the branding, making the logbooks and actually sketching out the product, not so much the how does it get put together, how's it manufactured and stuff. So from there, I sort of thought, well, I prefer doing the graphic side of my degree. So let me just try and get a job in that, really. So it was pretty much kind of everything that I've enjoyed in childhood, and then it sort of stemmed off into graphic design once I started learning about it at university. And then from there, just started trying to get my first job, really. So, mainly it's always something that I've been interested in, but it's sort of triaged into graphic design at a later date.
So one of the things that the reason why I wanted to have you on this podcast is because recently, well, before the new year, you posted an Instagram post about your job search and how long it took you to get that first job within the design industry and how long it lasted, and versus each job interview that you had, and you sort of explain that process a little bit. So what was that process like for you, and was there anything that you picked up on that you sort of had to do in order to get the job?
It was a really long process for me. I had friends who just managed to get a job in the first interview they had, or like a month after uni, and then I was just sort of stood there, I was working as a waiter at the time. And then I started posting stuff on my Instagram page just to get my first job, essentially. So I started from there, and then I moved back home to work with my dad as a builder then. I still hadn't got my first job in design. Then I finally managed to get my foot through the door at one place, which was just a standard, it wasn't even a graphic design studio. It was a company that did like wall decor for offices. So if they had like a big office space, they could fill it out with an image or a custom graphic. And then it was my job to sort of make that graphic that they would then have on their wall, which sounds like a good first job. But then they had to close within 2 weeks of me being there. So I was back to square one. Oh, go on.
Is that because the business fell through, or is that like
the owner of the owner of it was a bit of a bullshitter, to be honest.
Right.
He said he had like and then my first day, he fired everyone but me and one other person. And I was just sat there like, what the heck? Where the hell have I walked into here? And then 2 weeks in, I'd done like some like branding packages for him, and then he just said, "Yeah, I'm gonna have to close the business." And I was just like, "Great." First job lasted 2 weeks, and now I'm back to square one. So then I went back to building with my dad. I started at another place, which they said was a graphic design job for a marketing place. But then I got there and I was doing spreadsheets for 2 weeks. And I was just sat there like, why am I here? This isn't what I want to be doing. I'd rather not be working than spending my days doing this. So that lasted 2 weeks again. And then I was back working with my dad. And then probably about a year after finishing uni, I managed to find a design job, which was doing like design software and UI, which lasted longer. And then that's pretty much when my first proper job started, and I stayed there for a while. And then the rest is history. So it was a very painful, grueling process, especially moving back home, living with my parents and stuff like that. It was just... Yeah, it just wasn't the best of times, really.
Yeah. How did that make you feel at the time? Because I think one of the big things about this podcast is like trying to get people to, keep going and trying to be like, different things that they can be doing in order to try and get a job, or being proactive within their job search and that sort of thing. So how did that make you feel at the time, and what sort of things were you doing in order to sort of like, when you bounce back harder and stronger?
Yeah. Well, when all that was happening, I won't lie, it was pretty like soul destroying. I was just like, because I always say I had like the best time of my life at university, simply because of the experiences I had and the friends I met. So I almost went from like cloud nine, being at uni, got my own freedom, and then I've moved back home, which is already crap enough. And then I've had all this horrible stuff happen with jobs and not lasting. I just felt awful. Like I was wondering, what was I doing? Was this ever going to happen? Am I going to have to just change career paths before it's even started? But the thing that always got me through was every single night when I'd get home, the first thing I would do was open up my laptop and make designs and post them online. So even though it wasn't sort of leading to where I wanted it to go, I knew that if I just carried on doing this stuff at night and doing designs for myself, it's in turn going to create what I want to happen. So that was the main thing that kept me going through, was just me experiencing and experimenting with new design off my own will, really.
Yeah. It's something that's been brought up a few times in the podcast about like how to design for yourself without sort of like with your restrictions of a brief, or setting yourself challenges or something like that. So in terms of like coming home and after a day of work with your dad or whatever it was you were doing, was it always like in the mindset of like, okay, now I've got to get on and do this, because if I, just for your own sake, was that? Or was it like, I need to do this so I can get a job? Or was it, I'm going to do it because I enjoy it?
It was definitely, I'm going to do it because I enjoy it. It never felt like a chore. It always kind of felt like my little escape at the end of a really long day. Right. I did this kind of thing where, because where my dad does building jobs was really far away from where my mum lived, which is where I lived at the time. So I think it took me normally about an hour to get back home. So it was like 30 minutes on the bus and about 30 minutes walking back home if I couldn't get a lift. So it was always quite nice to sort of spend that hour sort of thinking about what I was going to be creating and things like that when I got home. So it never really felt like a chore. It always just felt like something that I could just fully switch off to and just get stuff done. And I think because I was posting everything I was making each day online, you sort of get that little instant gratification as well of like seeing people liking your work and commenting on it. See, that also helps as well, but it never felt like a chore, no.
Never felt like a chore, no. Yeah, it's good. I like how you start bringing up sort of like posting out to Instagram, and is that sort of that like posting every day, was that sort of like how you started to build your following? Was it just people you you were getting noticed a little bit, and you were able to open up for likes, feedback, and that sort of thing? Was that something that sort of started to happen naturally, or was it just like one post went viral and all of a sudden you had like a few thousand followers?
To be honest, I only started using Instagram just as a bit of a portfolio, where if I went into a job, instead of carrying in a load of paper or something like that with drawings on, I could just get my phone out or a tablet and just say, here's what I do on the side, and they can just scroll through. But I think it sort of happened gradually, and then it's sort of like a bit like a snowball effect. Like things start picking up, and then it starts building and building. And then I think there was one post where I did, what was it now? I think it was a Rubik's Cube that I did. It was in like pastel colours and stuff. And then that just sort of, it didn't go viral by any means. I think it got like 200 likes. But at that time, when I was getting about 40 per picture, I was just like, oh, whoa, this is like next level stuff. And then from there, it just sort of, it just goes a bit like that, doesn't it? Like it just starts to take off. And then if you put a little bit more time and effort into it, it's just going to generate more and more.
Yeah. Did you, as this started to sort of escalate and you're getting a little bit more attention from Instagram, did it feel like more of was there any sort of like social pressure there? Like if I don't post today, then maybe followers are going to expect things of me. Was there ever an expectation there, or was it just sort of like, I'm just going to keep doing it for myself?
It wasn't for the people who were following the work, really. It was mainly just for like, I feel like I'm in a habit of creating something pretty much every day. And my sort of philosophy was, even if I like it or if I don't like it, I'm still going to put it out there. And if people don't like it, then they're going to give feedback, and then I can probably revisit it like a year later and show people the results. But it was purely like, at that moment, it's purely a selfish thing, just for something that I wanted to do. I wanted to sort of say, can I just keep making a picture every day? Because I know it's going to just make me a better designer if I can do that. So even now, I don't really tend to focus on the followers or likes or anything like that. I just try and, as long as I'm still enjoying making stuff, and then that's pretty much what I'm basing everything off, really.
Fantastic. I mean, I've been a follower for a little bit. I'm a little bit of a fan, I'm not going to lie. Like a lot of your work, and I've seen you go back to sort of like older designs and redesign them and seeing how, like, okay, yes, it's the same style, but it's like how your design has developed, how you're able to create these vectors, how, and just like have those like side by side sort of contrast between, okay, this is what my work was a year before, and now here's what it is now. Is it odd to go back to old work and just sort of like redo it, or sort of have a rethink about how you approach it? Maybe opening up old Illustrator files and looking how you've like labeled layers, or if you've not labeled layers at all, and you just sort of have to like find what vector and what line drawing is what. So what's that experience like for you going back to old work and sort of reposting it?
I really enjoy it, to be honest with you, because you just open it up, and I always think, even if there's not been what some people would say work, because you see videos online, don't you, with people who have drawn an eye 1 year ago and then a sketch of an eye in the present day, and it looks like stupidly different, like it's so realistic what they're at now. But it's just more the little things I find that really blow me away, like how I've gone from making an object, because I try and make objects out of like basic shapes and then build them up from there. But then I find over time that I start to just say, well, I can just make one basic shape and edit it a small amount, and I can get to the same result. So I always find when I go back to old pieces, I go, well, I've kind of overcomplicated how I've made that. I can make that now in about 5 to 10 minutes just by making a square and changing a few points, and then I've got that shape. Whereas if I look at this shape that I made a year ago, it's like I can just see the sort of process it took me to get to that, and I'll always be like, that is just stupidly long. Why did I think that was the best way to make it? So it's more like the small things that I quite like picking up on when I'm looking back on old work.
For sure. when you look back at like uni work and like sketchbooks, I definitely have like the same thing saying, what was I thinking here? Or, open up the Illustrator document and how I've like, ordered certain layers or anything like that. And it's like, okay, I've overcomplicated things. And I think like looking at that process, you don't realize that you're making those like little changes. You said like building something out of a shape and making the small changes to get exactly what you need. And sort of, I don't think you realize that process of you making your entire sort of design process simpler, because at that time you're just going through the motions, but you're just doing it quickly. It was there sort of like a state that you get yourself into when you're designing work and you're trying to sort of you just know what you need to do. Is that something that you get into quite easily in terms of flow state, or is it something that you sort of have to like prepare for?
I think it varies. It kind of depends on, at this current moment in time, it kind of depends on what I've sort of got on in the week. Because now that, because I work full time, I do freelance work. I also make my own like content every day for my Instagram stuff. So kind of everything's a lot more regimented and sort of a bit more scheduled out now. Whereas when I first started, I had the time in the world to sort of go home at night and I could make a piece, post it the next day. Whereas now I'm kind of like, I need to start Monday with 5 pieces of content because I've not really got that much time to invest in making a new piece every night, because I'll start work and then I'll finish work, do freelance work, make my tea, tidy up, do some more freelance work, and then go to bed. So it's kind of hard to fit in making the illustrated piece. But if I've had a really busy week, then I find getting into the flow state almost a little bit easier, because I find it just a way just to switch off and relax. But then if I've had like a bit of a quiet week, I almost think if I have time to think about what I'm making, I find it a bit harder to get into that flow state because I end up overthinking stuff, which is a bit of a weird one, really. But yeah, if I've had a busy week, then I find it easier to sort of get into the flow state because then I'm just switching off at that point.
It's interesting that you bring that up, like about having a busy week, because it's like that ability for you to switch off. Is there also a link between, because you've been busy, you feel the need to keep busy?
Yeah, definitely. My mum's always said it as well. When I was a kid, I just couldn't stay in or just sit still. I had to just find something to do. So literally, as soon as I'd get home from school, I'd either try and go out and play football with my mates, or I'd try and start doing something, and my mum would be like, just sit down and have tea. And I'd finish tea and then I'd run out and go out and play again. So it's always been something that I've always been like, and I think because I've always had a job as well. I think at 13 or 14, I just went out to news agents and got a paper round, because I was just like, I'm tired of asking for pocket money. I just want to have my own money. So I've always had a job, and I think that's always something that's just kept me. So then I always stay busy. So I think that's more of a lifestyle thing, really.
So I'm getting the sense of like you've wanted to be independent from a very young age, or like always wanting to be doing something from a young age. So like you mentioned in school, you were always like drawing because that's what you enjoyed, and then you found out it was a career. And then at 13, you're like, okay, I don't want to sit around the house and ask for pocket money. I sort of want to be independent and have a job. Did that come? I imagine that came quite naturally to you, rather than people sort of like egging you on, because I know there's a lot of people that sort of are a little bit under pressure by their parents to maybe get a job. But I imagine for you that came a little bit more naturally than others, perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely still had the pressure from my parents about getting a job. It was mainly when I was trying to get a design job, because they come from very like old school type of jobs, where you could finish school at like 16 and just walk into the job you wanted and you're set for life. And they didn't really know a lot about design. They just thought I was just drawing. And they were like, how's this guy ever going to make a career out of this? He's sat in the kitchen drawing all day. He's going to turn into a right hermit. But once I got that job, because I always just said to them, I know what I'm doing. Like, just let me give it a go. So I got a lot of pushback when I was trying to get my first design job. But when I was a kid, my dad would always be like, if you want any money, you've got to work for it. Like they'd never just say, here's some money for the weekend. It was always, if you want some money, you need to actually earn it. And at the start, I always thought, why did they make me do this? Like, my friends just get given pocket money every weekend and stuff like that, but I've got to like do all this work. But looking back on it now, I'm like so glad that they made me do that, because it just made me realize that if I wanted to actually like earn money and have my own life, that you actually need to work for it. And sometimes even if you've not got work to do, you need to go out and find the work and stuff like that. So it definitely installed a be busy kind of attitude.
Definitely. So how old are you right now?
I'm 27.
27. Okay.
I don't know why I think about that then.
I've got a few friends, and I struggle sometimes a little bit with myself in this respect. Is that I've just turned 23, and I worry about age relation in terms of like most juniors are like, in my head, like most juniors are like in their 20s, like in terms of like junior designers, and then like graphic designers is like 30s to 40s, and then seniors is like 40 plus. Do you reckon that the age thing was apparent to you? Do you think it still links in with like a lot of people? Did you feel like a pressure due to your age, like to try and get a job there and then? I'm sort of butchering the question a little bit, but I think what I'm asking is, like, in terms of like age and career, do you marry the two together, or are you not really worried about where you are in terms of age and career?
It's a good question, to be fair. I think if I had to start trying to get a design job now, then maybe I would maybe think, I'd be like, oh, I'm a 27, I'm too old to be taking a junior role. But when I first started, because it was out of uni, so it was like 21. So it didn't really cross my mind too much, because I kind of knew at that age, anywhere you go, you're pretty much going to be probably the youngest one in the room. No, I'm not really worried about it. I feel like if you've got the skill and the expertise, and because a lot of things about getting a job as well is just how you speak to people when you meet them. Like, that's probably about 50% of the hiring process, is just how you speak to people and put yourself across. So I just feel like if you've got the experience and you know how to approach people, I don't think age in this day and age is really it's not too much of a factor these days, I don't think. I don't think in design, like if you're going for a really physical job where you had to be on your feet and walking around a lot, and you were like 50 or 60, then yeah, you're probably going to get a bit overlooked, because you're not going to be able to keep up with the pace. But mostly with design, as long as you can keep up with the trends and you actually have a passion to keep up with how design's evolving, then I don't think age really makes too much difference. Because I've met people who were like senior designers at the age of 25. It's just because they started working at a company at 21 as their only designer, and they've been there for so many years that they've by default become the head designer, and they just take it on the chin, and then they learn how to manage people and stuff like that. So I think the younger you are, probably the more passion you have for most things, because it's fresh. But I've never really worried about age too much, to be fair.
That's fair enough. It's a great answer as well. It's a topic of conversation that me and a few of my friends have more often than not. It sort of starts to go around in circles, because we can only really say so much about it because we're all similar ages. I think that will definitely shed some new light on that sort of situation, and maybe change a few mindsets, which I think is really nice. Go on.
I was just going to say, like, because because I've worked in loads of different places as well, you kind of realize that no matter how old someone is, they've all sort of done the same as you, or had the same thoughts. Or I've met people who are like 40 at work who are just trying to start their own thing, and they've never once gone and worried that I'm too old. So yeah, I just wouldn't worry about age, really. I don't think it's a massive factor. I mean, yeah, it's just not a big factor these days, I think, because you can have different peaks at different ages, can't you?
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. obviously at the grand old age of 23, I've probably only had like 2 peaks. So, so moving on a little bit, you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, just before when you introduce yourself, that you try and take everything, you sort of base yourself as a graphic designer, but like to take in like whatever comes through the door, essentially. So let's say, like, for example, motion graphics. If a motion graphics brief came to you for a freelance project, and you might not be skilled in motion graphics or anything like that, like how do you approach a new project, and how do you sort of, because if someone's coming to you for a project that you've not really maybe got a lot of experience in, like how do you sort of approach that and make them sort of realize that you can be that designer?
I think because I have had in the past where I've had projects come through and I have been like, I know how to do it, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to deliver what they need. So at that point, it's me being completely honest and transparent with them. So I can do motion design and graphics to a good standard, but I wouldn't say I'm not going to be able to make like characters move and jump around and backgrounds change. So I suppose at that point, it's figuring out if this is in my skill set that I can do. If it's something that I've got to look extra into, I'll just be honest with them. I'll just say, I won't lie, I'm not an expert at this, but I can give it a go if you want me to. I just want to be honest with you that this could or might not work out. It might not sound the most professional thing to do, but I feel like in this day and age, people would rather work with someone they trust at this point, because I try and be honest with people. But if it's something that I know that I definitely can't do, then I'll probably just find someone else who can do the work, and I'll just sort of take a bit of a slice from passing that work on.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that's happened when someone's coming to me for a potential like freelance project. Again, with sticking with the motion graphics example, is that someone wanted like a portrait doing, so I can draw you a portrait fine, but in terms of like, they wanted me to like motion illustrate it. Not really something I've done before, and I was like, okay, the best I can do is this, but also like if you want it the way I'm thinking you're asking, I've had to like pass it on to people that are going to do a much better job than I can. And just I think in terms of just like being honest with yourself, being honest with the client as well, because I think that whoever the client is, they're going to appreciate that you actually say, you've recognized your own sort of limits or boundaries, and then you've said, okay, I can't do this, but I know somebody who can, and they're going to treat you very well. I've worked with them before, or just that power of connection, whether it be like an Instagram follower, or someone that you know through LinkedIn, or someone that you know personally who is a friend. I think they'll just appreciate that so much more, that you've actually just passed that on to somebody else. I think they'll appreciate the work as well.
100%, because I think if you just say no, you can't do it, then they're probably going to be like, oh, all right then. But if you pass someone on who can do it, you're not only helping that person who you pass the work on to, you're helping the people who have asked. You've not just said, no, I can't do it, and washing my hands of it. You've gone through that bit of an extra bit of effort to sort of help them out. And then 9 times out of 10, when they need something that is in your expertise, they're going to come back to you and just say, oh, well, we need this. Can you do this? And you can go, oh, yeah, I can. And then vice versa, the person you gave the work to, if they get some work in that they can't do, and they know that you can do it, they're just going to give that to you because you've sent work their way. So they're not going to forget that. So I don't think it's anything to be worried about. If you can't do it to the level they're asking for, if most graphic designers speak to other graphic designers, and you can probably find someone who can do it that you know.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of this podcast is sort of like a little bit selfish on my part, because it was like an opportunity for me to talk to new graphic designers, and also keep in touch with people that I'd either been to university with or maybe heard of while at university. And it was sort of like nice to touch base with them and just about like what sort of work they're doing and that sort of thing. And I know for me, it's like there's a lot of very talented illustrators that do different styles. And if someone comes to me with like a piece of illustration work, and I'm like, okay, I could do that for you, but there's also these people that you might want to consider that might be a little bit more to what you're looking for. So it sort of just helps to be connected, and also to respect that other people might actually appreciate the work as well if they were to have that project, just in terms of what's being output and that sort of thing. You spoke a little bit about how you design every day for Instagram. Does that come with a critiquing of your work? Because obviously, I imagine there's some sort of value here of like, design something today, even if it sucks. So like, is it, even if you don't like it, do you post it, or is it like, I need to just set it down for the day, maybe I'll post it tomorrow? Or, you know, how does that work for you in terms of like, if you don't like what you're creating?
I'll be honest, I'm really bad with like checking my work. I kind of just make it, and then once it's at a point where I say that's done, I move on to the next, and then I'm like, right, that's done. Let's start the other piece of content. If it is something that I don't fully think is working well, or just think people might not like it, I'll always export it and save it into my drafts, because I'm like, well, it's there as a back burner then. If I'm just feeling a bit ill one day and I just don't have the energy to make my normal amount of posts, then I'll just have that one as a backup in my drafts, and then they accumulate over time. So before you know it, I've got like a week's worth of rejected work, which doesn't sound like the most professional thing to put on your Instagram page. But I've always just been in the kind of ethos of whatever I make, even if I like it or not, I'm going to put it out and just see what other people think of it, because I feel like I've got enough followers now to know that there's going to be a good percentage of people that like it, even if I don't think it's good. And for all I know, it might inspire them to make a piece of work. So that's good in itself. Even if I don't think it's that great, someone else will think it's great. And I've had it as well where work that I think is absolutely awful, and I've like posted it like 3 months later down the line because I've just not had any content. It's been like the best post that I've had that month, and I'm just like, why are people liking this so much? It's awful. It's weird. It's like a catch-22 kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's odd, isn't it? How like you'll like one thing and then somebody else won't like it. But it's just like music taste. Like some people are just into certain types of music, and others are into different. And there's like overlaps in some genres and that sort of thing. So I do like that you share work that you might not think is the best that you've possibly produced, right? Because it breaks down that barrier of being your best self on like social media, and just sort of there's like a level of humanity there, I think, and I think that's really important for not only yourself but also for your followers to realize that, hey, I'm not a big conglomerate on the other side of this screen. I am just a person, and you know, this is what.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think when I first started posting as well, I was kind of a little bit switched off to sort of posting stuff like where I showed my face and everything like that. Because I was just like, got glasses, sound like I hate my voice on microphone and stuff like that. So I don't want to be showing my face on camera. I'm not like made for showing that on Instagram. But I feel like it just breaks everything down. I feel like people take themselves too seriously, to be honest with you, when it comes to posting the work online. Like at the end of the day, if something bad happens, just press delete and get rid of it. It's not going to be the end of the world, is it?
A lot of people don't realize that. I think they don't realize how much control they actually have over their own account when they're like, oh, so and so's followed me, or someone's left a really nasty comment on one of my posts. And it's like, you can just delete it, right? That's like a thing you have. And it's but how will they react? Well, they won't react because they won't have anything to react to. So you know, I think there's a lot of people that are, particularly on social media, whether it be design or personal, that it's like, stop worrying about what other people think, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect you.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people who like to give their opinion on work as well online. Like, because I like to post some stuff where I go through like either like a bit of my process or like a bit of like what goes through my head when I'm trying to illustrate certain scenarios. Like I think I did one about like different light sources, just on a sphere, really simple. And I just had like, if you have like your light a bit further away, it's a little bit like duller. If it's closer, it's going to be brighter. If you've got light coming from here and here, you're going to see it from those two bits. And I put that all in like one post, and then like a couple of people were like, it actually wouldn't be that bright if the light was that close. And it's just like, shut up, mate. Be quiet. And then you look on their profile, and then you're like, you're doing the same thing I'm doing. Like, just people like to criticize things online. I think it's because I feel like you notice things that stand out when it's not your own work. I think a little bit, because I think when you see a post by someone you really like, you like to break down their work, don't you? And sort of you overanalyze it because you want to sort of like figure out how they've made it, and then by doing that, you're going to pick up on things that aren't perfect, but those things that aren't perfect are what make it by that person, if that makes sense.
For sure. I think it comes with like not necessarily wanting to be them, but wanting to be as good as them, sort of thing. So you might want to not be like, let's say like Aaron Draplin, for example. Like I don't want to be Aaron Draplin, but to design a logo like Aaron Draplin would be an amazing feeling. So you sort of, like, I've got his book right here, and you sort of like analyze like the way he approaches some things and like his inspirations behind it, and you're like, oh, okay. So he sort of like not forces you into a way of thinking, but allows that another opportunity to be like, okay, so maybe on this project you approach it a little bit differently and see if the outcome's any different. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, maybe a certain process works for you a lot better. Maybe you have to sketch a certain amount of ideas or have to sketch for a certain amount of time before moving on. I think it's just like a matter of like what works for you and what works for the people that you are inspired by.
Yeah, it's like there's a, what's the saying now? It's like there's a million and one ways to do anything, really, isn't there? And if you can just look at how someone has done it, don't take it as the only way to do it. Just sort of figure out how they've done it, how to play with it yourself, and you'll probably find that there's a way that you find a lot better way of doing that one thing. You're probably going to get to the same result, but find it works better for you, then who's to tell you that you're doing it wrong? Like, there's no wrong way of doing things. It's like a few people on my process videos go, why are you using the Pathfinder tool? You can just use the shape builder. And I'm like, it's the same tool. It gets you the exact same result, and I like using it. So just if you want to use it, go for it, but you don't have to. This is just how I do that thing.
Yeah, one of the big things I like about the not just Adobe products, but just a lot of you could probably take this thing to Word as well and have the same analogy for it. But it's like there's always more than one way to do something, or like more than one way to like whether apply color or something like that. And some people it works for one way, and then for other people it works the other, and like the difference is essentially non-existent, but just the way around it might be like the difference of like one or two clicks. But I just really like how that it sort of opens that up to be like, you can do it this way or you can do it this way, but whatever suits you, you're probably going to get like a similar result. But as long as you feel comfortable doing it one or the other, then that's fine on us, really. And I think that's really nice about like certain creative products and that sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like just do you at the end of the day. If it works, then who's anyone to say you're doing it wrong at the end of the
day? We spoke a little bit there about seeing work that you like. Is there any particular designers or maybe artists that you take inspiration from or look up to quite highly?
Oh God, quite a lot.
You don't have to name all of them, just a few.
Definitely people like Made by James, Fugstrater. There's another artist who I really like who's based in New York called CJ Hendry. Her work is just absolutely crazy. She literally just used like coloured pencils, but they look like realer than photos. It's absolutely mental. There's another painter who I like called Jun Lee. He does really cool. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but he does like really cool like portrait paintings. But instead of doing all the detail, he'll just use like a palette and just scrape on color, and then that makes up the face, which sounds like it's never going to look like a face. And that they don't have eyes, they don't have noses, but the way that he just scrapes on that shade of color builds up to make what you would see as a face, and it just looks really cool. People, I've started getting inspired a lot more by YouTube artists, definitely, because I just like how different it is to sort of how I normally do work. Like people like 1000, Slew, and stuff like that. Gawks. There's loads of people, to be honest. I kind of how I normally use social media is to be my inspiration board. Like the more people that I can follow whose work that I like, then every time I go on my phone or my computer, I'm just going to be surrounded by inspiration. And I kind of feel like that's a key thing that you should be doing if you're in like a creative industry. Just surround yourself by as much creative things. Like, have you ever used Muesli, the Google Chrome? That's really good. So you can if you set that as your homepage, the minute you turn on Google, it just like loads the best images from like Dribble, Creative Blog, and loads of different like inputs, and that's your homepage. So as soon as you load it up, you're just bombarded with like hundreds. Yes, I think it only works for Chrome, but if you just get that, and then you select what sources it brings in, and then you just every time you open up your browser, you've just got inspiration there and then.
Okay, I'll be sure to check that out. That sounds really good, actually, because right now it's sort of like all I've got is it's just Google, essentially, is all it is. So having like some sort of internet, and here we go, like instant inspiration, because it might be something that is something a bit different. Maybe there's a different color about the image. So I really like your idea of curating sort of social media to be inspirational, and every time you go on there's something different and something that you might not have thought about, either like process wise or color palette wise, or maybe how two shapes overlap each other. So yeah, thanks for sharing those. Let's see, how much time do we have left? Okay, cool, no worries. We've not really spoken a lot about creative block. Is that because you said you've just designed every day for quite a while now for Instagram? Has creative block ever come into that? Have you ever just been physically drained, mentally drained, and just not been able to do it, or just feel like you can't do it? And how have you, and if you have, how have you combated that?
Yeah, I've definitely more than once got to the point where I was just walking around like a zombie. Like there were times where I was staying up till about 3 o'clock in the morning after a full day of work, doing freelance work, and then making my own work, and then waking up at like 7:45 and doing it all over again. And then after about a month of doing that, it's going to take its toll on you. I've found I only really get creative block when I stop looking after myself in just daily stuff. Like if I'm not eating right or doing enough exercise or just getting outside enough, I find that all has a knock-on effect and just slowly builds up and gives me creative block / burnout. But I've always found the best thing to do for me personally is just have a good routine of things that get you away from the screen, and just have enough things away from graphic design to be able to just pick them up and start doing that. And then you can just come back to graphic design when you're feeling a little bit more inspired. Like, so I really enjoy climbing. I do that 3-4 times a week when the gyms are open normally. Days that I'm not climbing, I'll do like body weight exercises at the flat. I really enjoy my cooking. Like I've got like a load of cookbooks that I really like reading, and then on the weekend I'll spend time making really nice food, because that's just something that I've got a passion for, just making nice food. I like DJing as well. I used to DJ at house parties at university, and then at university, and like I collect vinyl now and stuff like that. So just have enough things. Like you need like 3 or 4 hobbies, and then you can just sort of, when one thing starts to like, you get a bit bored of it, you can pick the other hobby up until that gets boring, and then by the time you go back to that other hobby, it's not going to be boring again. Yeah, just variety is the spice of life. So if you can spice it up a little bit more, just that's how I've always overcome creative block. Just focus on something else for a bit. And when I say a bit, I don't mean like just completely cut something off for like a month. Just spend like a day or that afternoon doing something else, and you'll find when you come back to that other thing, you'll just feel like a new man.
So sort of like a that would, like, I imagine graphic design, especially if it's career based as well, it's always like a main thing, but also having like these things on the side that you can sort of have a passion for, as well as, and then sort of you can switch off from the career. Because if you're, I think for me especially, I think that if I was always thinking about work or always needing to do work and was in that mindset, I think I'd just eventually just run myself down like so much, and then it cause probably a lot of like mental issues will probably follow with that. So I think like having, like, whether you go just switch off for the day where you don't even think about it, maybe you've had maybe there's an idea at work that you need to get across to a client perhaps, and then just completely just shutting it off for an evening, and then just coming back with fresh eyes and trying not to think about it too much, I think helps a huge amount. With that, I'm going to move over to the recommendation section of the podcast, where we recommend a book. Now, I did ask you to maybe think about having something to recommend. Do you have something to?
I do.
Yeah,
do. Okay. I was wondering what to do because I was torn between things. But I thought I best go with something that's actually physical and people can actually get. And I've gone. Do you want me to tell it now, or do you want me to? Is there like a build up that to do or anything? Or I've just gone with a standard notebook. It's quite weird. I don't actually do a load of sketching for someone who illustrates as much as I do. I tend to just make things there and then. But the reason why I picked a notebook is just because when I've got a load of stuff to do in the day, or I need to start planning things, I always find that I can figure things out a lot more by just picking up a piece of pen and paper and writing it out. Like, there's something about actually writing every single letter to make up that task list or that project that I'm working on. It just always helps my head figure it out more. I don't know why. Like, I've tried loads of stuff online, like Trello. I think it's one where you can just like make a notebook online and type it out. But I always find that ends up being something that goes to the back of my head. But if I just write it out on a physical bit of paper, then I don't know, for me, just something just happens in my head where I can think about things more logically, and I actually remember to do it.
Yeah, I've got so like if I'm working on like a client project, then I have a project for myself, then I have a huge A3 sketchbook, because I like the space. I can draw, I can make notes, I can scribble stuff out, I can basically copy stuff. There's a room for multiple variations, and then for stuff like this, I use field notes.
Oh yeah,
just notepads, and also and also for sketching as well, just maybe like quick ideas, or ideas that I think that just don't need like a whole pages like they do in my sketchbook, or like whole sections, which are also like really useful. It's interesting that you mentioned about like physically writing something down, because I've also used Trello, and I've used Pinterest to try and put mood boards together, or try and get color palettes for certain things. And I think something that was drilled into me, particularly at university, not so much in A-levels when I studied graphic design, but particularly at university, was that always sketch something, always have something on paper before you take it to the screen, because it would just help. They didn't really explain why. It was just like, you're just going to have a much better process of trying to build what's on the page in front of you to what's on the screen in front of you, rather than just trying to hash out on a screen. And I think that's like been like a fundamental for my process, is always like, okay, yes, use social media, use Dribble, or whatever it is you use to get inspiration, but at the end of the day, like for initial sketches and ideas and thoughts, like pen and paper is the way to go. My recommendation for this week is Draplin Design Co. Pretty Much Everything. So big old book full of Aaron James's Draplin logos, about a little bit about his history, how he did snowboarding magazines, logo designs, just everything about his life, pretty much, because it is pretty much everything, as the title suggests. Just a really great book for not necessarily just logos, but in terms of just thought process, graphic design, illustration, and just how to approach things and how to solve a problem that is going to be presented to you. Because as graphic designers and as creatives, we're going to be given a lot of issues to solve, and there's lots of ways to solve those issues. And I think that's just like a nice way to try and think about it in terms of like how he's done it and the iterations of the logos and how he knows what works and what doesn't, and the balance and the colors to use. Everything that you could involve within, particularly in branding, can be used against that book as well. So yeah, big inspiration to me. And also I know it's also a big inspiration to a lot of university students as well, because he's just so like down to earth, and he's like, cut the bullshit and this is who I am, sort of thing.
Yeah, so his TED stuff's really good as well. I like his TED. He's done a few TED talks. He just sounds like a really cool guy. Just you know, you just see someone online, you think, I'd just like to go have a beer with you. Sit at the pub,
sure.
Have a beer, chat a bit of shit, and that's all I'd want to meet you for. Like, you just sound like a cool guy.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think designers in particular are the ones that I like that are raw, that are like that I can go for, like would like to go for a beer with and just have a sit down and talk to them. And just because they've been completely open with me across social media, so I can be so completely open with them about like my personal life and, you know, my design styles, and we can just, you know, it feels like you can talk to certain designers. You can talk to them a lot more about just design. You don't have to talk about just design. You can also talk about other things as well. And being in that comfortable space where you can do that, I think, is really important as a person. I think it's something that you've also mentioned, Jack, yourself, is like just being honest with the people around you and being honest with yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can be the best designer in the world, but at the end of the day, if you're a dick, it doesn't matter how good you are at design, just people won't want to chat to you or work with you. So you need to be a decent human as well at the end of the day. It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah. We've spoken a little bit like about social media and growing that and having. Would you say you do freelance, you have a full-time job, and you also obviously build your Instagram account as well? Is it difficult to balance those three in terms of like what you're going to do and when, or does that sort of come naturally in terms of like, okay, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do this?
Yeah, the stuff for my Instagram, that's really quite regimented now. So it's every Saturday I'll jot down ideas that I have throughout the week of what I might illustrate on the Saturday. By the time Saturday comes, if I've done sort of one thing to illustrate a day, then I've pretty much got my week's content there and done and dusted. So that's pretty regimented, just because I just found it helps me keep everything else in order in my life. If I just sort of know that I've got that one day where I can make the stuff I want to make on that day, then I'm a pretty happy guy. The freelance stuff, that fluctuates. So if I've got a load of projects on the go that are due in like a week or two's time, that it can get quite hectic and I'll have to put a lot of late nights in. But then if it's like a little bit quiet, then I do tend to really enjoy that kind of moment, because I can finish work, make tea, watch a bit of TV, and I can chill and refresh. It varies really. It can get quite a bit to sort of handle, but I think it's sort of, once it's happened once, you sort of figure out ways to make it not be as bad as the last time. The thing I'm having trouble with at the moment is finding time to make YouTube tutorials, because I've made like 5 or 6 of them now, but they take so long to make. Like just like the actual filming of the footage takes so long to do. Thinking of the video, filming it, editing it, that's just a really long process, and something that I've not managed to fit into my workflow as nicely as I wish I could have. So I was originally thinking, I can make 1 video a week on a Sunday and then I'm fine, but it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, for sure, right? Life gets in the way of most things, and it's something that because for Creative Corner, it's mainly me that like has put everything together in terms of like visuals and also scheduling and putting the post together. So when we were coming up for ideas about how this was going to get promoted and posting to social media and designing, and then also doing the book post as well that we also do for this podcast, it was like, how is that going to fit into everything else that we're trying to do at LifeProof? And does it need multiple people in order to facilitate it, or can it just be one person? But things get in the way and things go wrong, spelling mistakes, etc. So it's like you try and plan it out for mistakes to happen, and then the mistakes do happen, and then you sort of make something else, and then something else will get in the way because either another project will happen or something. Just what I'm saying here is that life gets in the way, so just expect shit to go wrong, because shit will go wrong, and then just try and bounce back as best you can. And if a mistake is made, then try and rectify that and be honest.
Yeah, just don't beat yourself up about it. At the end of the day, if you're doing anything in life, you're gonna mess something up along the way. Like you're never gonna do something and it's gonna be perfect and plain sailing the whole way. Like even if you're trying to think of, even if you're Elon Musk, you're gonna fuck up. Like when he hit that, when the glass smashed, when he was like, "Oh, this window's bulletproof."
Yeah.
It just smashed. Like that was a mistake. But he wasn't sat in a room moping about it. He was just like, "All right, well, there's obviously something wrong with that. Let me sort of work with that, and then it won't happen again." Problem solved.
Yeah. Sticking with Elon Musk, I remember SpaceX released like I think it was like maybe 2 years ago now. They released a video of a montage of all of their thrusters crashing, and it's like, and it was like, oh, this is where we've started. Look at all the mistakes we've made. And it's sort of like that idea of like there are humans behind this idea, and humans make mistakes, but here's what we're doing to rectify it. Because then at the end of that same video, it showed the 2 thrusters landing like next to each other at the exact same time. And so it was sort of like, yes, make mistakes, but also like work with people that can aid those mistakes, make better, and if you're going to make a mistake, make a good mistake, so you can, learn from that and how you can move forward and progress and ultimately reach your goals in which you've put in place.
Yeah.
So final few questions then for you, Jack. With your current experience within the creative industry, how do you think it's going to change in the future?
I think given everything that's happened in the past year, you're going to see a lot more companies that are a lot more design orientated, looking for people who have got a digital presence and can deliver with digital work, because now more than ever they need to have a digital voice. And as a designer, I feel like we should be the people who can help them and aid them with that. So it's going to be a lot more of a crucial role. I think it even is now. Like I think it's already happened. That's definitely how it's going to change more. People are going to be a lot more dependent on what designers can offer, because you just need to stand out when you're posting work online. Stuff needs to stand out and make people stop scrolling, because some people just don't stop scrolling half the time unless something catches their eye. So I think that's how it's going to change. And I'm never really one to sort of look into design trends too much, because I feel like they just change every year. Like It's always 1 year it's no gradient, next year it's radial gradient, the year after it's a linear gradient, the year after it's a free form gradient, and then it's probably going to go back to no gradient again. But I feel like you kind of want to tune into them a bit, like look at what people are saying they are, or things that you might have noticed yourself. But at the end of the day, if you think it looks nice, it's all you can ask for, really, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, there's definitely a conversation there, isn't there, about like how to make something timeless. And okay, there are certain logos and certain visual identities that we see that are timeless, and but it doesn't mean they've not changed for 1,000 years. So, you know, some logo might be the same, but if you look at their visual identities and how they've applied that logo to certain, whether it would be like a packaging product or maybe it'd be a UI or UX design, perhaps. Those are always changing, but in order to, I think it's just like the idea of like adapting with the times and how to better yourself as a designer, and also and the people that you're working with and how they can all adapt and change I think is going to be important, especially in the next few years, just to see what life is going to be like after this is sort of like being set aside.
Yeah, I always try and say to people, if you can learn like basic design fundamentals and practices and design thinking, that's never really going to change. That's set in stone now. The things that will change are like processes, tools, trends, and that's sort of where you need to sort of keep up with stuff. But at the end of the day, if you know a good amount of design, how to get to an end result and how to think about things in a design way, then you're golden at that point. So I'd always just say, make sure you know how to do that, and then just keep up with trends if you want to. But that's not really going to make you an amazing designer, because you can figure out everyone on Dribble puts unrealistic UX shots on there and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So final question then, Jack, which might be a little carbon copy of maybe what you've just spoken about a little bit, but what is like the number one piece of advice you would give to little Jack Royle coming out of university? If you knew him, like what would you say to a budding creative such as yourself coming out of university?
There's probably a few stern words I'd have with my younger self coming out of uni.
Brilliant.
If I was speaking to a younger creative just coming out of university, I would say this is probably going to be the weirdest transitional moment of your life. I probably wouldn't sugarcoat it. It's going to be a weird moment for you. It's going to be a weird moment for your parents. It's going to feel shit at times, but if you know that you're working towards a goal that you want, just go for it. If you finish uni, you're 21, you've not got a house, you've not got a mortgage, you've not got a kid. If anything goes wrong, you probably just move back in with your parents for a bit. Like, just go for it. If you feel happy and in the right direction doing that, then don't let anyone say to you, you're doing that wrong. Just if they've got advice for you, listen to it and apply it. But if someone says to you, why are you doing this, or it's never going to happen, just be like, mate, I'm 21 at the end of the day. Leave me alone. Like, you can make mistakes. Just have fun. And if you feel like you're making steps in the right direction as to where you want to be, then you're doing the right thing. You're young at the end of the day. Don't take life too seriously. Wait till you hit 30 to start taking things seriously.
Brilliant. And that's some great advice to end the podcast on. Jack, thank you very much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me, mate. It was good. This is the first time we've actually had a proper chat with each other, isn't it?
Yeah, we've spoken a few times on social media and stuff, but never like a face-to-face chat. So yeah, it's been interesting just to learn about each other and about certain processes and that sort of thing, inspirations, and just like going from A to B. So yeah, everyone, thank you very much for listening or watching, whatever it is you were doing. If you don't follow LifeProof already, that's at LifeProof UK across all social medias. So be sure to follow those about opportunities, creativity. We've got a bit of everything going on there. There's lots of things to come in the new year as well. Let's say the new year, we're in February right now, lol. Is coming this year as well. Some new changes. So yeah. So Jack, again, thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully everyone can stay safe, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks for having me. Cheers for listening, guys.